So Chief Kwah's dagger, Chief Kwah was known as the first carrier to own a dagger. And legend has it that it was passed down from the coast, from the ships coming on the coast, and it was traded inland. Chief Kwah received the dagger in a potlatch west of here, a big potlatch, and it was really a valued piece of, like, it wasn't really because it was a big weapon for its weapon purposes, but for its status and its rarity, because at that point, that was the early trading of the ships. So when the first fur traders came into this country, they were surprised to find Chief Kwah had a metal dagger, and he was quite famous for it. The dagger, one of the famous things he's famous for is the Hudson's Bay. Found they accused of a fella of one of the carriers of stealing or hurting a Hudson's Bay person in another town, and the Hudson's Bay factor at the time, his name was so James Douglas was the factor at the Hudson's Bay post over here, and they went and found this guy, and they actually ended up beating him to death and killing him. At the time, they found him at Chief Kwah's fishing camp. Chief Kwah was away hunting at the time, and when he came back, he found out what had happened. So him and a few of his men went to the Hudson's Bay. They took the fort over, and they actually had James Douglas with his dagger. I'm not sure if it was Chief Kwah or one of his men had Chief Kwah's dagger at James Douglas's throat, and rumor has it that his wife and another lady, his wife who was carrier, pleaded for his life, and she threw blankets and stuff, and they thought better of it, so they let him go. James Douglas ended up, people were still after him, so the Hudson's Bay actually moved him down to the coast, and he actually became the first governor of British Columbia. So it might not have been, he might not have been that if he hadn't had this run-in with Chief Kwah. So that was one of the famous things. So later on in life, this guy here in this corner here, his name was Louis Billy. That was Chief Kwah's grandson. The dagger was supposedly passed down, and in Louis Billy's care, the dagger went missing, and there was a guy named Monroe who was in care of it, and for some reason he lost track of it, and they couldn't find it. And we found this letter not too many years ago of Louis Billy asking, this is from Father Maurice to Louis Billy, and Louis Billy must have asked Father Maurice to look into it, because it explains how Father Maurice was looking in Winnipeg for the dagger, and for many years they couldn't find it. In more recent times, they found a dagger with a different handle on it, and if you see the rust marks, actually are exactly. So later in life, like more recent times, they found this dagger with a different handle on it, and if you see the rust marks, they're exactly, it's like a fingerprint. And so that's how they found out that the dagger had its handle changed. And at the same time, they did tests on the aging of the dagger. And they found that there's too much hardener in this dagger to be the original Chief Kwah's dagger. This dagger is in the fort down here in the Fort Museum. And so it dates right to the time of Chief Kwah's death. So when we, we don't know where the original dagger went. Some people still say this is Chief Kwah's dagger, but the tests are pretty conclusive. And Grant Keddy of the Royal British Columbia Museum did a study on it. Most of this writing is his paper on the dagger. And there's a picture of the dagger as it looks today, and that's the one that's in the park.
Which one's that?
The one below the Chief Louis Billy.
Oh, okay.
So I made a replica here, and there's a coin from 1970, in the 70s, a coin that had a depiction of Chief Kwah on it. So I put that on the dagger. So when I tell the kids, I say, "Where's Chief Kwah's dagger?" And they say, "We're not sure." I say, "Well, where's Louis Billy's dagger?" They say, "Down in the historic park." "Which dagger do we have?" They say, Coyote's dagger. So that's a little bit of the history of Chief Kwah's dagger. Like I said, he was the first carrier to own a dagger. The dating is the 1770s is when he supposedly got it, which is very early in the trading days.